You're listening to the BIGCast, your source for the latest in financial technology. Brought to you weekly by the Best Innovation Group, with your hosts, John Best and Glenn Sarvati.
Welcome to the final edition of the BIGCast for 2025. My name is Glenn Sarvati on behalf of the Best Innovation Group, subbing in for John Best, who has been called away on a short notice. But we have the rest of our group together for our annual get-together on the biggest stories of 2025 impacting credit unions and fintechs. First, I'll just mention you can always find out more about the Best Innovation Group by checking out the website big-fintech.com. Let me let you all go around the table, our usual crew of folks with great levels of perspective and hopefully some difference of opinion. I know we probably agree on some things. I'm guessing we diverge on others. Anne, you want to start by kicking us off, going around the table?
Absolutely. Hey, everybody. So happy to be here again. Anne Legg, founder of Thrive. I think the number one story, of course, is going to be...
No, don't say it yet. Don't say it yet. We got to be quiet. The thing that the Voldemort that we do not yet say its name.
Okay. All right. Well, Anne Legg, Thrive. Hello, everybody. So excited to be here. And thank you so much for having me.
How about you, John?
Hey, everybody. John Janclays here. John, the founder of the CEO Corner. Look forward to this episode every year with all my peers here. Glad to be here.
And our longtime compatriot, who's now kind of newly at the main table, off the kids' table, at the main table, Lou Grilly.
Hello, everybody. Happy to be here. For those of you who are listening who don't know me, I was manager of innovation at Valera until recently, and now I'm off on my own, voluntarily off on my own, and also keeping involved in the credit union space on the board of a large credit union.
Well, with that in mind, I think, Anne, you are going in this direction. I think we compared notes. I don't think anybody will be surprised. In unison, why don't we all say what we think? The biggest story of 2025 was 1, 2, 3.
AI.
However, let's take it in like our own little spins from there. John, you said you had some good stats. Why don't we kind of start with you kind of setting the table on what you see about, why AI was the story it was?
Well, I think it's, just been in the headlines for all of us, but like everyone here, I'm curious. So what is the adoption rate? And I found a pretty cool index. It's 4 years old. It's called the Evident AI Index. It tracks all of the largest financial institutions, their spend, their innovations that they're recording, the amount of work they do with universities. So this index is made up of 5 different areas. Their hiring they're doing, and it's really amazing. So no surprise that Chase is number 1, Capital One is number 2, Royal Bank of Canada is number 3. This is measuring the United States, Europe, and Asia as far as the adoption rates of AI.
That's interesting. So Royal Bank of Canada is number 3. I would not have guessed that. But those all 3 of the top 3 are North America, or do they have Europe and Asia in a separate category?
I think number 11 on the list was HSBC in Europe. And I was surprised to see Bank America lower in the index too. But if folks want to go check it out, it really is a really cool index. They have white papers that back up kind of what their analysis is, and they have a conference. And I thought it was really interesting because it isn't just AI for AI's sake. It's like, tell us about the adoption rates and what kind of wins that you're getting with it. And for example, they talked about the year over changes in hiring against the top 10 banks, now standing at 90,000 AI workers across those 10 banks. This is a 25% increase year over year in headcount that's tasked with implementing AI. And they also talked about like examples at Chase. They've moved from 12 use cases to 25 in 1 year's time. So kind of answering the question, how fast and how far are we going and what are the use cases? So it's happening. It's more than just an idea and a science. It's happening very deeply. And then I wondered, credit unions, how many credit unions are implementing AI? And there's some research out there that says 66% of credit unions are now using AI. So I'm sure everybody here has got a point of view and some things to add to the comment, but I thought that was a really cool index to watch about the speed and the velocity of hiring the people who will implement AI and also the use cases that are going to work.
And this is why I love doing these things. I am not familiar with that index. So let's, if it's freely available, let's post a link to that in the show notes.
Yeah, I'll send the link.
Write that down. And I think you started to this was one of the topics that you were kind of thankful for at our Thanksgiving edition too. in terms of the way this could be leveraged. So why don't you kind of take it from there?
Thank you so much. Okay, so as we look at it, and just to dovetail what John said, we've got so many more applications, but many times we're hearing this whole freak out about it's going to take over our world and it's going to be scary. I want to take a hot minute and remind everybody that agentic AI is not about replacing people. It's about compressing time. Okay, so credit unions have the value advantage, right? Human in the loop is already how they function. So those who win at AI are going to be the ones that have a couple of really important things: clean data, have the right people in the room to make the decisions, and documented pathways. All right. So AI is not going to become a liability, but it's going to be the way we measure impact and momentum. So if we look back in 25 and go, hey, 25 taught us that AI isn't necessarily going to fail because it's too powerful or it's overwhelming. It fails because no one's defined what we want to use with it and what we want to measure with it. So I'm excited that it's going to be able to, as I said over Thanksgiving, it's going to accelerate what we're doing. And, for what the industry is doing, it has the potential to do that. It has the potential to really take a spot and really make credit unions have ability to scale, but also have the ability to have larger impact. And that's what I think is truly the big story of AI from my vantage point.
And you hit on the two key words that I want to get to, but before I do, Lou, what's your take on this? So from a board perspective, or whatever other angle you'd like to bring home?
And started to go down a path of, it's still relatively new and we still don't know the power and what's going on. So I want to take us back to the beginning of this year, January 27th of 2025, and a relatively unknown Chinese AI startup called DeepSeek came out of nowhere and released a new model called R1 and a new large language model, V3, which claimed performance comparable to OpenAI and Google's, but also claimed that it was developed at a fraction of a cost. And this sent shockwaves through markets, especially the AI supply chain. And you want to talk about headlines: NVIDIA's stock plunged that day, January 27th, by 17%. That was a $600 billion loss, which still is the largest one-day loss in U.S. stock market history. And the pull from that for me was, this just happened this year, and there's still a lot to be developed, and there's still a lot of room to grow in the AI space.
That is an amazing reminder that that whole DeepSeek thing was still this year.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny too, because that kind of puts a kind of added explanation. We've talked a lot about the Best Innovation Group bingo card, and we had NVIDIA got on there twice in two different directions. Their stock dropped by 10%. I forgot that was the catalyst action. I was thinking it was the tariffs, but no, you're right. There was actually another reason why it took that big hit at one time. And then, so that's one bingo check. The other one was outperforming the S&P 500, because it came right back from that, and now it's still more than double, almost triple, I think, the S&P 500 performance right now. So, it just tells us it's not going to be a straight linear path. It's going to be up and down and all kinds of good things going on. Yeah. And you mentioned two things that were kind of front and center in my mind in this. One is my favorite phrase, and I think particularly from a credit union standpoint with the use of AI, is the human in the loop. And the whole notion, and I remember seeing I think was it 7 of the largest credit union CEOs on stage at Money 2020. And I don't want to misattribute. One of them actually made the point that their credit union has made a decision, at least for now. I don't know how long this is going to stay in the future. They will never allow AI to say no to a member. They will do research. They will help it make decisions. But if the decision is no, it's not just going to be a robot spitting out, sorry, you don't compute, you don't qualify. It's going to be, okay, send that to the human. Let's see if that's really where we want to go. If so, make sure we're not missing something. People helping people. You also mentioned, both of you, I think, mentioned agentic AI. And that was a phrase that I don't think I ever heard until very late last year, like October, November. And I'd say that was the most central piece. And I think the number one takeaway, again, I got from Money 2020, including the fact that the rules of the game have to be made. If your agent makes a decision for you and makes a payment and something goes wrong, are you legal? I mean, technically the definition of an agent, you are responsible because you have given it, that you've delegated the authority. That's going to be an interesting one. And both from a legal standpoint and also from a trust standpoint, are people really ready to relinquish that level of control to something that they don't fully understand? So I think there's a lot to play out on that one as well. So I think we got the two first vowels, no, the first and third vowel in the alphabet out of the way, A and I. Anybody else want to jump in next with? I've got a few other things, but let's see. I got a feeling we're gonna have overlap on our list because there were an awful lot of big stories. Anne, why don't you got another one you want to throw out there?
I do. I want to kind of go to something again that we talked about at Thanksgiving, and Lou really set this off beautifully. So Lou, if I'm stealing yours, woohoo, it's just a tag team for us, right? And that is how credit unions responded to the government shutdown, right? The shutdown really was impactful, and let's make sure we are talking about it. It didn't just hit spreadsheets, right? It hit households. And what I love, and I think is such a great story, is how credit unions literally became the shock absorbers. Emergency lending, skip-a-pays, liquidity bridges, right? They really went in and turned what was the situation into a member experience event. And I love that this is the position that they took, and that this is the area that they jumped in and put their arms around. And I love how it shows what the industry does and how it's a point of differentiation. And I love how it also shows what it does in financial crises. So I love that story. And I think that's one that we definitely made my actual number one list, but I did give it to number 2 this year.
And we may be seeing more of that again, too, because as we recorded this, supposedly we were very close to having a budget resolution that would have taken us most of the way through 2026. It fell apart, and we're still staring at a January 31st deadline for what maybe, whatever round number you want to call it, depending how far back you want to go. And your point about, stepping up in this, I'm reminded, and again, it's another headline that wasn't on my list, is Jim Nussel's old phrase of financial first responders.
Yes.
And and again, Jim Nussel, another headline, stepping aside as the head of now America's Credit Unions, formerly CUNA, and Scott Simpson taking the helm, which will be very interesting from there. Lou, you kind of teed this one up. Anything else to say about the shutdown? Or we got you covered?
So, not specifically about the government shutdown, but another thing that was a government thing was Liberation Day, April 2nd, which caused a lot of market angst. That's when tariffs were first going into effect. The S&P 500 went down 19%, and there was so many predictions. April of 2020, a little bit later that same month, Jamie Dimon stated that a U.S. recession was a likely outcome. Consumers would stop spending, would see a great recession, tariffs would drive inflation, which would result in mass layoffs. And we did see some layoffs. But the nice thing is we didn't see all of these dire predictions come true. So that is a thing that happened at the Liberation Day. It happened in 2025. That was another headline that caught my attention. That's
a great point. And I still remember kind of in the April, May timeframe when the S&P was still down. Even after that initial shock, it made a recovery, but it was at a net loss for the year into at least May, if not June. Thinking, okay, well, we've had a bunch of really good years. They can't all be winners. And, next thing you know, we're back in double-digit gains again this year, which maybe not quite at the level they've been the last few years, but my gosh, if you can bank 10% plus return on your assets, I don't think anybody's going to complain too much.
And I'm just going to take a quick moment on that to say we haven't hit a recession yet, and I'm usually the glass half full kind of situation, but just putting a point on it. Let's anchor on the good stuff, but knowing forward. And that was my cringy face.
Stay tuned for our predictions episode in January. And Anne, I know you're going to be submitting some for that too. So, and, I'm starting to wonder, again, I'll jump the gun on this, the definition of a recession may need to be revisited too, because I always think about it as GDP growth. If jobs kind of fall down and you've got a couple of companies that are driving, GDP growth, maybe revisit exactly what we mean by that. That old, it's a recession if you lose, your neighbor loses your job. It's a depression if you lose your job. That kind of a thing.
Yeah.
John, how about
7? Right? Yeah.
What's next on your list, John?
You know what? I want to revisit. We had some discussion last year about this returning to the office. And, how's everyone thinking about that? And, I'm a big fan of being at the office for a lot of reasons. But Korn Ferry just put out some research that said of the Fortune 500, 35% of them are calling people back to the office. And one of the reasons they're talking about that is their succession planning and career ladders of leadership, that they're finding that leaders don't grow as well on their own as they do in an environment. And maybe that's not a 100% answer, but you can see there's some wondering about that. And so for credit unions thinking about if we're still in that environment, how are we really building up our career ladders and the succession planning that we need to run a more and more complicated business? So, there's no answer to that, but it's just kind of a question how the pendulum is kind of swinging back and forth, on trying to solve for this. Yeah.
You're giving me a reading list. I love these studies. Corn Ferry. And when you say 35%, that sounds lower than I expected, but I guess you're talking full 5-day a week return to the office?
Yeah, full to the office. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we've seen, kind of more flexibility, maybe with a 3 or 4 day thing, but I've definitely noticed, at least here in Atlanta, that trend where, there are very few that are purely, fully flexible anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also you bring up, when you're talking about succession planning, you also bring up the board interaction too. Many boards have now gone virtual, which has been fantastic on many levels. It might increase participation, but then you also we need to have that face-to-face human interaction as we're doing our education. Like, where do we sit with that board leadership as well?
And in the case of a crisis, I would think you definitely have to have that. It kind of comes back to the same thing I thought during the pandemic. If you've already established the relationships, you can work remotely and you can work by Zoom. If you haven't met these people, so as people start cycling off and new ones come on, at some point, you've got to really establish those bonds in the first place. Maybe I'm talking like an old guy, and you can do that if you're 20 years old and you can just do it purely virtually. But I still feel like, face-to-face interaction at some point becomes pretty important.
Well, as somebody who has been I spent half of my career being part virtual, and then the second half of my career being completely virtual. There's a couple things that are really interesting. Number one is that not everybody is set up to be virtual, and not every position is set up to be virtual. And I think we really learned that incredibly well during the pandemic. I think that was help of what escalated. I think McKinsey said that we escalated we jumped 7 years in our technological advancement. But to John's point, though, we have to be mindful that some things are best done in person, not necessarily every day and not for every position, but of those, we have to understand what is most important and then figure out how do we maximize that.
Good point. Mm-hmm. I'll throw another one on the table that kind of continues to be something I look at all the time, is the Genius Act and stablecoins. And, the Genius Act, we finally broke the log jam of exactly how we're going to build a framework for dealing with stablecoins. And it basically, I think, served as like the flag went up, said, okay, guys, go at it, because we've had what I would call a land rush ever since then in terms of the way things are. There's, SoFi is now talking about their stablecoin, and lots of other folks. I mean, you lose track of all the different ones. PayPal's got one out there that's already very widely distributed. JP Morgan, very well known, but dealing mostly from a B2B standpoint still. The game's just starting, and I think we're going to be seeing a lot more of that. We still have the Clarity Act, which needs to be added into the mix, that will create more, rules about how you are going to regulate this as a commodity versus an asset, et cetera. But to me, that was, both a big story this year and one that's going to continue to be have ongoing impacts going forward.
And I want to make a point on that. Before we kind of anchor on the word stablecoin, I want to kind of just do a broad brush, which is one of my favorite things to do. Is it's also about payments, liquidity, and speed.
Yep.
Right. So what we're really talking about is disintermediation of deposits, right? So what do we think about how our ledgers look? How do we think about that flow? It's not about who launches the first stablecoin, but who remains relevant when money is now moving at the speed of light.
Yeah. And I come back to that point also. How many stablecoins? I mean, you want fungibility. I go back to the days of all the different bugs in the back of the credit card. And you got to figure out, does your ATM take this card? Can you use this card at this gas station? At some point, it feels like a pendulum, and everyone's going to want to have their play. But at the end of the day, you're going to have some kind of interoperability to bring it all together.
Mm-hmm.
Who's next? Lou?
Okay, I'll go to Pay by Bank took a step forward at the very beginning, January of 2025.
You haven't gotten out of January yet. This is amazing.
No, I'm still in January. You're right. X9 is a standard. It was published in January 2025, and X9 is a QR code standard that enables pay by bank through your digital online mobile banking, and securely you're paying through a QR code that is dynamically and securely generated by the merchant or the payment acceptor. It's already been piloted. This enables pay by bank, so that took a step forward. It also enables pay by wallet, which sets up the ability to pay using stable coins and tokenized deposits. The standard was released in, as I mentioned, January, and work groups continue to update the standards. They've submitted it as an ISO standard. And let me get a little geeky here. Speaking of ISO standards, Fedwire Funds Service, which is accessed by every financial institution via Fedline Advantage or Fedline Direct, migrated to ISO 20022 in July of 25. This replaced an old 80s era proprietary exchange format and brought Fedwire up to modern day global standards.
That was a beautiful nerd out, Lou.
I was about to say, we had to have somebody go down a nerdy rabbit hole.
But beautifully done, though. But thank you for skipping down that road with me. That was phenomenal. I want to talk about CFPB.
That was on my list too. You start, I'll layer on.
Okay, so, there's so much we could go in, and I wish I had the beautiful nerd out that Lou just gave us, so I'm going to go high level again. And what I want to kind of highlight is this doesn't mean less regulation. This means more fragmentation, okay? So as we think about it, we have to really be thinking about, especially from the credit union space, like data access, clarity, strategic takeaways, truly like governance matters now more when the regulators retreat. So basically, hey, credit unions, onus is on you now. And you really have to make sure that you step in, which many times as an industry, we're not quite ready. So it's not that the responsibility goes bye-bye, it's that it goes back to the institution. And I just want to make sure everybody's we just a little wrapper on that we just go, oh, well, that is a bit of a breather, but wait, who's holding the responsibility? Onus is you, my friend, lovely credit union.
I agree with you. I want to pile on there that open banking, which dropped in the end of 2024. I think, Glenn, you and I were in the audience when Rohit Chopra announced it at Money 2020.
Exactly. That was a keynote kind of main event.
He was, yes. And it was kind of a last minute ad. And then in 2025, the CFPB asked a completely revised, gutted CFPB asked a court to vacate the ruling. And then, Glenn, you and I talked about this. Chase struck a private deal with Plaid, which kind of set a precedent now that, yes, you can have access to our data, but you're going to pay for it. So kind of like one step forward, two steps back. My takeaway is open banking is definitely here to stay, but rather than heavy-handed regulation, it's being market-driven. And I'm with Ann that credit unions need to pay attention to this and still need to be on team open banking.
Yeah, and I wanted to get to open banking as well, but on the CFPB very specifically, it falls in that kind of careful what you wish for category for me, because CFPB has been the boogeyman for a long time. And another one of my favorite takeaway quotes, I think it was from GAC, if I'm not mistaken, one of the breakout sessions, that somebody said, if someone gives you a box of scorpions, you should thank them because they're confined in the box. And basically, by shutting down the CFPB, what you've done is you've turned over the box, and all of those folks who were looking at these regulatory issues are now scattered elsewhere, including at the states. And as we all know, nobody likes dealing with 50 separate state regulations. That's another thing that's going on too, the AI regulation, where they're trying to prevent states from actually taking that approach, which from an interstate commerce standpoint, I understand, but then do something at the federal level. If you're not going to act, it's kind of difficult to tell nobody else to act too. But having said that, I think that is, to me, a key with the CFPB. I don't think the story is fully complete yet. Now we've got the funding issues and whatnot. So that's still an ongoing story, but absolutely agree that the absence of that, immediate kind of spotlight on you does not say, hey, it's time to, let up on the compliance.
I love that analogy of scorpions in the box.
That was one where I'm like, okay, I am not forgetting this one. Yeah.
That is a good one. It applies to a lecture I just sat on. It was a 2-hour lecture with the CEO of NASDAQ, SoFi, and a bunch of companies that are helping to enable blockchain. And the point of their discussion was all the things that they're running into, these scorpions, that they have to decide about transparency of transactions when they are securitizing assets that SoFi is originating and putting into the market. That transparency of those transactions, who gets to see it, when they get to see it, because that kind of transaction information on the blockchain is very valuable to competitors. The speed and flow which you're changing assets, what assets are you changing, what price are they changing at? And so NASDAQ is having to sit back and think about if they're making a market to securitize those assets using the blockchain, how and when are we going to give transparency to this and who gets to see what?
That is interesting. From a proprietary data sharing standpoint, you'd like to still have some level of control over that, especially if it's enabling your direct competitors.
Yeah, but the upshot for SoFi is they talked about 140 basis points of cost takeout in that process that they're going to be able to do with that, and think of the competitive advantage that lends them by using blockchain. Amazing.
You got another one on your list, John?
Oh, mine was just the use of blockchain. Looking for all these new sciences. Where are they, and are they showing up, and are they having a material difference? For the people who are running financial institutions, and that is just a perfect example of, it's having profound effects already in cost takeout and efficiency and speed to market. It's redefining when markets are open, right? Blockchain go 24/7 rather than when the markets are generally open. So it's just running into just all these, I want to call it constraints we've had before. It's unleashing some things, but it's creating a new set of questions and theories. Back to your scorpion analogy, right?
And to your point, you mentioned NASDAQ. I don't even think they're talking about doing it with blockchain, but they're looking at going 24/7 on their trading.
Yeah.
And I heard somebody kind of derisively say, yeah, because if you really wake up at 2 a.m. and really want to trade an ETF, boy, I'm thinking, yeah, but you're kind of forgetting the rest of the world. This is a global market. It's great that somebody in Chicago is going to sleep, but somebody else in Singapore is going to be up at that same time.
Yeah,
exactly. And then to that point, so if you've got 724 and you've got transparency, holy smokes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lou, you had mentioned open banking, and that to me was kind of one of the components of what I just saw a trend of, just these never-ending legal squabbles. Is a final rule a final rule if it gets upended, 4 months later? And
you're going to bring us to the Visa MasterCard settlement with merchants.
I wasn't even going to add that one. I was thinking more, that is a court case. You're right, but I'm thinking about the Illinois Interchange Act, which formally was approved. It was supposed to have gone into effect back in July. I think between the court, the lack of clarity, because there's still court cases that are floating around out there, as well as the fact that I think the legislature kind of finally realized that they had, signed off on something that was very, very difficult to implement, if at all. Certainly in the time frame that they gave, they pushed it out for a year. So I'm sure we're going to be revisiting that again in July.
Right.
Open banking, same thing. Like you said, never mind. And we had a final rule. We got rid of it. Then we thought again that maybe we didn't get rid of it. We're going to redo it a little bit. And we're still waiting for that. Supposedly it's supposed to come out by the end of the year. So by the time you're listening to this, there may be the proposed revision to that rule. And to your point, Lou, the market has spoken to some extent. I love the idea that the market may take care of itself. I don't know that necessarily fully applies in this case, because you wind up with a de facto agreement, that may not necessarily work for everyone, just because it works for the biggest data aggregator and the biggest bank in the country. When you've got 9,000 institutions that are a fraction of that size and a ton of fintechs that are a fraction of that size, those terms may not, it might be a great template, but I don't think it's the end of the story.
Glenn, the thing that struck me as I was thinking all about this is 2025 really reminded us that waiting for legal clarity is no longer a strategy. It's kind of a huge risk.
Yes, absolutely. And based on what we're seeing, I think you have to assume that, whether it's the midterm elections, so the beginning of 2027, or maybe at the beginning of 2029 with the next inauguration day, you're probably going to have another, you always have a swing in the pendulum, but you may have a more dramatic one than we have in the past.
But you know what? Let's kind of put a couple of points together here, though. If you've got adaptable data architecture, which means you probably have some decent governance, you will be in a much stronger position. Second to that, though, is what's your vendor relationship and making sure your vendors are semi-buttoned up in the way you can be. But truly, all of this goes back down to scenario planning.
Yeah. I mean, it's and tariffs and everything else make it very challenging to make investment decisions. But the ability to pivot being kind of predicated on just how flexible your systems are, I think you're spot on. I've got our Bitcoin predictions from last year in front of me. I can move on to that unless there's anything else that have we not hit anything that is on the table that we'd be remiss in not mentioning that we kick ourselves a little bit later if we didn't have on the list.
I wouldn't say that this is a absolute showstopper, but here's something that caught my attention. SpaceX in 2025, apologies, has nothing to do with credit unions, but SpaceX in 2025 launched 160 rockets. It's about one launch every other day on average. And just for comparison, NASA's shuttle program over a 3-decade period, 1981 to 2011, only launched 135 missions. So SpaceX accomplished in 1 year what NASA did over 30 years.
Wow. Okay. Which just is another telling indicator of technology's rapid ascent in general.
Well,
very true.
And then what Musk talks about is, right, the learning that comes from that, the rapid learning. With every mission, you learn and you improve. So the rate of improvement is way up, with these sciences. Yeah.
And the improvement specifically in that sector and more broadly, as we know, between Velcro and the internet and all kinds of other things that pop up, as adjacencies to the initial mission. I'm sure we're going to be reaping the benefits of that over time too.
Yeah.
So maybe one of you, I have not looked today. Bitcoin's been moving pretty dramatically. I'm not sure exactly what the price is right now, but I went back and looked at last year's Bitcoin predictions. We're not making predictions today, but just going back and looking at, and Bitcoin again has had a wild ride, as we've talked about before. And I don't want to get in the situation of patting myself on the back, but it looks like I came out the closest this year. And
there you go.
Mostly by luck, I would have to say. Because what I was rooting for was a stable year, and it wasn't stable, but it wound up basically ending roughly where we started. And that's where so anyway, John Janklius, you were the most aggressive of the crowd this time. You actually predicted that we would end the year. And again, as a reminder, I believe we started the year right around 90,000. We'd already had a pretty significant run up at the tail end of 2024. So at the time we were recording our predictions, I think was kind of mid-January and was probably sitting in the mid 90s. You had us going to 195. So that was the high mark. Mm-hmm. John Best, who's usually the most aggressive, he had us actually moving up to 165. And he mentioned that, something has to give in interest rates. So he was actually predicating some of his logic on a decline in interest rates. It did finally happen late in the year. So to the extent that might have affected his assessment, I'm not sure. And then, Anne, you had a prediction that it would surge and then implode to some extent because AI would create a surge in fraud. And you had it actually going up and then dropping to 40,000. Having said that, John agreed with you. He thought you were just a bit premature. He actually saw that same AI-driven fraud issue coming up, and he kind of pushed that out to 2026. And as I said, and I've been saying for multiple years, I think that a nice boring year is what's Bitcoin needs more than anything else, which would be a nice moderate increase. So I had it at 85, and that is roughly where we're at. But I'm not taking a bow because it went way up up to 125. It went all the way back down below 75. And anybody looking now, I think it's probably sitting around 90.
No, I haven't looked at it today.
Okay, I think it's right around there. So that's where we're at, and we'll see what happens. And as I said, and John kind of added, and I do think this may be true that the Napster phase is coming to a close of cryptocurrency that you're getting, and whether it's in part just the adjacency effect of stablecoin, you got the more legitimate players coming in there and kind of establishing. You got banks looking back into getting into the mix. So we've got all that going on.
Exciting.
So that's our roundup. Anything else? The other one that I had on my list that I thought it kind of fell one level below, and I think we'll be talking about it further, are the Trump accounts for newborns. And the money that's been now being pledged by some billionaire philanthropists to help fund those. Really interesting idea. And I'm really curious to see where that goes. And that's another one the credit unions have to look at. I know that's one of the things America's credit unions has been advocating for, that, it's still kind of a concept, and it's the rules of the road have not been established. And where are those accounts going to reside? What are they allowed to invest in? Who can participate in them? And that's still to be determined. And I think that'll be an important piece. Anybody else know more about that I've missed about those accounts?
I don't, but I love the concept, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think across the political spectrum too. I forget. I think it might have been. I don't want to miss a trivia. I think it was Alex Johnson who puts out a great weekly newsletter. He said, "I like this idea so much that I'm even willing to allow them to be called Trump accounts," which I thought was interesting. So, and it is. I mean, there's absolutely nothing wrong with the idea. But again, the devil's in the details. How are we going to actually run that thing out? And to make sure that it doesn't become an excuse to, limit funding of other things like 401ks, or, it's a little bit like a 529 plan or something like that, which has positives and negatives.
Exactly. And again, concepts are great. Execution, whole different thing.
But definitely, if it's not on the roadmap, I think credit unions, that's a piece that particularly when you think about, both the member base that we're already representing, as well as the desire to actually make sure that we're representing a younger member base. What better way than to actually have an account established for someone even before they're old enough to have an account?
Yep.
Love it.
Agreed. Well, I just want to say thank you, everybody. This is always such a wonderful session. You guys are great.
If you guys
I appreciate being included in this as well.
Best way to get in touch, John. You mentioned the CEO Corner. Is that another link we should add into?
Sure.
How do people get in touch with you?
Yeah, www.theceocorner.com. You can reach me there.
AndlegThrive.com, if I'm not mistaken, Ann.
Yeah, and you can always find me always posting a bunch of stuff, almost as good as Glenn, on LinkedIn. So definitely make sure you connect with me on LinkedIn as well. And
Lou, LinkedIn the best place for you?
Absolutely.
And I think we talked before we even started recording that all four of us are going to be at GAC in early March. So
maybe we should do a podcast from GAC.
That is a great idea. And whether before or after the content, how we want to process it. I always have and I've already confirmed my annual get together with the economics team who do their annual update at GAC, and I sit down with them immediately afterwards. But there's no embargo on tape. I can, it's digital now. It's not even tape. We can record more, and that'd be wonderful. Let's plan on it.
Perfect.
Done deal.
Well, we're taking a 1 week break from. Actually, I take it back. It's a 2 week break, I believe, from new content on the BIGCast. So if you catch up with this relatively early, but we should have new content, I believe, the second week of January, and one of those first couple of weeks will be our prediction episode for 2026. So be watching for that. Everyone have a wonderful holiday season, and we'll see you in the new year.
Check back each week for the latest from the BIGCast. Or better yet, we hope you'll consider subscribing for free via Spotify, Stitcher, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you have questions or comments, we'd love to hear from you. Tweet us at BigFintech. Email info@big-fintech.com. Or visit us at big-fintech.com and click on the Media tab, where you can post a comment or check out our archive of hundreds of past episodes. See you next week.